Let me hit you with a truth bomb. Your data doesn't just live in your office anymore. Now, that may come as a surprise to some, but it really shouldn't, because we instinctively know, or we should know, it's on your phone, it's on your laptop, it's in your supplier system, maybe even it's on USB sticks rattling around in someone's car. And every single time that information leaves the safety of your office walls, the risks skyrocket. That's why ISO 27001 has this control and it's A7.9. So what does it state? What does it actually require? Well, it's a pretty simple one, to be honest. It states that off-site assets shall be protected. That's it. Plain and simple. Short, sharp, to the point. But if you ignore it, it could cost you everything. Now, before we continue, let's be clear about something. It talks about off-site assets shall be protected. So what are your assets? Where are they? These are two questions you need to have to define to understand. So what are your assets? Well, that's something you should have looked at as part of your asset register. You should have identified things such as digital devices, mobile phones, tablets, mobiles, laptops, that type of thing. But also think about the physical aspects as well. So files, archive documents, sales records, and that takes us into thinking about the actual informational assets as well. So your HR data, your customer data, your intellectual property. These are all records and information that you probably should have on your records of processing activity, your ROPA, from a UK and EU perspective, a requirement under GDPR. Separate topic we won't get into, but essentially you should have already identified what your critical assets are, what's important to you. And this control is all about how you ensure that these are protected when they are off-site. So why is this important? Well, as ever, I would like to bring this to life to give you some examples of where we've seen this impacted organizations and individuals when they haven't really thought about this. So the first example I would give you is well, I'm sure we've all heard of it, someone losing a laptop or a mobile phone. Now, in this particular instance, it was someone who came to the organization and said, look, hands up, unfortunately, I've lost my laptop at a train station. Now, the laptop itself wasn't encrypted. The information on it, sensitive client and customer details. Now, they lost it because they left it on the train. They literally were in a rush. They'd fallen asleep on the train and they'd woken up, and unfortunately, as they were packing everything away, they put the laptop down on the seat to pack all their papers away, grabbed their suitcase and just legged it off the train, and the piece of equipment was gone. Now, of course, this means that if the device is unencrypted, then it's a reportable incident to the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, facing risks of fines. Certainly, we had to inform the people whose information was on this particular device, which of course meant reputational damage both to the firm and to the individual as well. Sleepless nights, unnecessary stress because the person hadn't really thought about the protection of that device by putting encryption on it. It wasn't about the fact that they'd lost it, it was the encryption piece that really was at fault. Or how about, again, another example that I'm going to give you that we will have all experienced or heard of, where an employee of an organization left their phone in a bar. Frustrating for sure. Is it a real problem though? Well, yes, it is. You see, that phone had access to emails, files, and even client portals. Now, without proper security in place and multi-factor authentication or the ability to remote wipe this device, it was a walking data breach waiting to happen. Okay, just to be clear here, before anyone accuses me of fear mongering and saying, "Well, okay, Gary, yes, people lose laptops and mobile phones all the time. No great problem. It's not often these devices fall into the hands of some master criminal," which I agree, doesn't. You're absolutely right. But the disruption it caused to that individual and to that firm that had to admit this had happened, which of course meant that there was reputational impact upon the firm and on the individual again, um, was significant. Why? Well, it's significant because it meant delays in certain projects and proceedings that individual was involved in. It meant that important information and dates and meetings had to be moved. So, of course, it was going to have an impact, but it's broader than that because this kind of incident indicates a wider problem. It's an indication of behavior. As the saying goes, how we do one thing is how we do everything. So what does it tell your clients and your customers if you have to get someone to call them or email them and say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but we've lost we've lost a laptop," and it means the project's going to be delayed by a week while we get things back up and running, or can we delay this meeting because we've lost a mobile phone or we've lost some important files. It's an indicative behavior, and it will have a negative impact upon your reputation and potentially could have a financial impact upon you as well. And then finally, because it's not all just about you, it could be a supplier. One supplier was currying paper files, yes, physical documents, archive files, and such. But unfortunately, they didn't secure the documents themselves, and they went missing. But who was held responsible? Not the courier, not the supplier, but the client, because they are ultimately the data controller, and of course they are ultimately accountable. That's why this is important. It's about protecting assets. Remember, an asset is something that is important to you when it's not within your control. So what will the auditor be looking for? Well, again, this isn't just one single document or one single thing that they're going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for indications that you've thought about offsite assets. So this could be thinking about the actual asset itself. How do you protect it if it was when it's out and about and it gets lost or it's left somewhere? So the auditor is going to want to see a range of things like that you've implemented multi-factor authentication on devices, that you've enabled encryption on those devices as well, where it's available. They'll want to see things like privacy screens. Again, it's a very low cost indicator to everyone, both the user and to auditors, that you care about the protection of informational assets. Yes, they're going to want to see other policies. So they'll want to see things like your clear desk and clear screen policy. They'll want to see things like remote working policies that show that you considered the risks when people are working remotely, whether that be at home, whether that be at a client site, whether that be in a coffee shop or on the move, in a train, on a plane, that kind of thing. They'll also want to see things like supplier agreements. So they'll ask to see a supplier agreement that includes within it information about the protection of information. So your supplier agreements should have something along the lines of an outline of what to do if there is a reportable incident, how quickly they need to report it to you, for instance, and indeed what is a reportable incident, and also within the supplier agreements, what are your expectations on them for security. So you might stipulate that they, the supplier, are ISO 27001 certified, or that they have commensurate security controls, both organizational, technical, and people and physical controls in place. However you do that, it just needs to be within the supply agreements, because the auditors undoubtedly going to want to see it. And of course, in terms of your offsite assets, like many of these controls, if there is an issue, these should be on your risk register. So the auditor is going to want to see something, some indication that you've thought about this on your risk register, and I have identified what the risk treatments are going to be. And finally, of course, the auditors going to want to see that you train your teams around this particular topic, that you have explained your expectations, that you've communicated the policies and the procedures. So if someone does lose a mobile phone or does lose a digital device of any description, that they know who to escalate it to. Again, another great example here is where an organization that we worked with, whilst they did communicate it out in terms of what their expectations were, at a partner level, this message wasn't being uniformly applied. And when someone lost a laptop, they reported it through to facilities, because it was stolen. In actual fact, they didn't just lose it, it was stolen. And what actually happened was that they'd left the device in a bag on the back seat of their car, and their car unfortunately was broken into. Now, it was a company car, so the first thing that they thought of was, well, I'll just simply report this through to facilities, because they were the ones who managed all the company vehicles, and they were the ones who needed to fix the glass, etc. And it was only because the facilities team thought, hang on a minute, well, why did they break the glass? What was stolen? And the response was, oh, they stole my bag. What was in the bag? My laptop. Okay, so now we need to inform IT. Now IT gets involved. IT say, well, we need to buy a new laptop. Yeah, okay. Is anyone at any point going to mention the data that is sat on these devices? And it was only because the chief data officer was very very smart in positioning themselves within the IT team or department, and they sat within that function, so they could hear calls coming through, and they knew the kind of incidents that were being raised, and they picked this up, and they were able to say, well, hang on a minute, guys, it's not just the fixing of the glass, it's not just about the replacement of a laptop, it's also about what data is on there as well. So training and awareness, really, really important. So what do you need to do? Okay, as ever, this starts with good risk assessments, but it's also about identifying what is critical. So identify your assets. This goes back to an earlier control that we spoke about. And you need to define also what offsite actually means for you. So offsite typically does mean working from home. It means working in public spaces, working on third-party sites. That includes clients. Is it all the above? Is it all of those things? So you need to define what that is. As I said, you need to have got this identified through your risk process. So identify where assets do move, where do they go, and then think about what the risks are to them, and then apply an appropriate risk treatment process. Put those protections in place. Encrypt laptops, have auto locking of screens, so you have a clear screen policy. Lock down USB drives and implement multi-factor authentication, for instance. Set some rules for data sharing and put those rules into policies and procedures put them into supplier contracts, and make sure that, again, you communicate those out. So it's about defining what offsite means to you. It's assessing the risks. It's about putting protections in place and then document and train people on it. Because here's the bottom line with this particular control. And it's A7.9 isn't just about protecting devices. It's protecting assets. It's about protecting your reputation, your clients, and dare I say it, your potential future, whether that be your future success in your business or success within your particular role. Because data is, I'm going to say, is the second most important asset your organization has. The most important asset is always people. But in this day and age, data translates to people. But data doesn't care where it lives, and it is highly mobile. There is a bit of a cliche in information security circles where people say that data is the new oil, meaning that it is highly valuable. Well, I would agree with that. But I would also say, look at this, it's slightly different, that yes, data is the new oil, but data is the oil because it keeps your business moving. If it's lost, if it's not there for any length of time, then everything can come to a grinding halt. So I hope that's been helpful. Protecting of your assets when they're tightly under your control is relatively easy. This particular control asks you to think about how you protect assets when they're outside of that control. Thank you very much for watching. As ever, I'm Gary Hibbard of Consultants Like Us, the co-founder, and we make compliance simple. It's all about compliance without complexity for us. It's about communicating it in clear and human ways and to make it easily applicable to you and your organization, which I hope this control or this description of this control has done. So thank you very much for watching. If you have found it useful, please do give it a like, give it a share. I'd love to hear your comments. And remember, by sharing this, you never know who you're helping. And don't forget to hit the little bell in the corner, because that will remind you of the next video that is coming in this series. Thank you very much for watching again. And until next time, stay well, stay safe, and stay connected. All the very best. Bye.